Good morning, Jan.
Michael, good morning.
How are
How are
things
you?
going? Very well, very well.
You recalled that you remember that you answered the question?
Yes, well,
Yeah,
that's kind of what I do, yes.
I was. It's assuring when I read that I'm not the only one who who forgets things from time to time. Yeah. Okay. But it's like just now my wife told me you forgot Valentine. I said no. This morning I gave you a big hug. Oh, only a hug. Yeah.
Yeah, we might forget Valentine, but we don't forget the historical modeling stand-up. This is our priority right here.
The essentials. The essentials. I have some good news. Let's put it that way.
Excellent.
SQLite. I dived deeper in the documentation. I did a lot more testing.
Hmm.
I made a small summary. Share the screen. Let me show you. Yeah, a little bit Excel here.
Hmm.
Um, is it readable? So
It's coming in. Yeah, it's still a bit fuzzy.
right.
Yeah, there's like artifacts across the top, but then the middle is readable there. That's a bit better. Okay, that's a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, let's start with the conclusion. Yeah, we will
Mm-hmm.
get to the details. So here, the rollback, that one we knew last time already. So the rollback starts at the select statement and not at the begin transaction.
Mm-hmm.
So we open the transaction, then we do a read select, and the rollback happened at the read and not when we start the transaction.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a little bit funny. So you have a database file, and if you put it in WAL mode, you will also have the WAL file,
Mm-hmm.
that write ahead logging file. And on top of that, you have a WAL index file. So the WAL file is where everything gets written to. All the new things are written to the WAL file, not to the database,
Mm-hmm.
which has the advantage that you can read and write at the same time. And the WAL index is only there to find new pages very quickly in the WAL file. It's just to increase the search speed.
Right. Yeah. So you don't have to scan the wall file for every query.
Yeah, because at a certain moment you go and read something, and you have to find out whether from a certain page in the database is there a newer version
Mm-hmm.
available in the WAL file.
Yeah.
And the WAL index helps with that. Now, the funny thing is, even if you're just opening a database for reading, there will be a WAL file and there will be a WAL index file.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just the database file. And also funny, every time you close all your connections, the WAL index and the WAL file are both deleted. They are not persistent.
Okay. Um,
And
and is that specifically when you did not do any writes?
if even if you don't do any writes, you just open the database
Mm-hmm.
to read, uh, you will see that it creates a new WAL file
Mm-hmm.
and also the WAL index. And the moment that happens is not when you start a transaction, but is at that same select moment.
Mm-hmm.
So before we saw the rollback happens at select,
Mm-hmm.
and that's also the moment that it creates these two files, the WAL file and the WAL index.
Okay. And
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 there
does
it
it
gets
know that it was opened for reading? Is there When you say open, do you open it in a mode that says I'm only going to read from it?
No.
Right. Okay.
A transaction is you just send to the database begin transaction.
Mm-hmm.
It's only at the moment that you do a select statement.
Mm-hmm.
Then he will tell you, okay, now you're reading. And the moment that you do an insert, then he knows he's writing. So
Okay.
at that moment, the locking will change.
All right. So neither the database connection nor the transaction know that there's no insert coming. They're
Yeah,
prepared for that should it happen.
yeah.
Okay.
But so we will get to all the locking immediately. But that means there are two important things. The first thing is the creation of this WAL file and the WAL index. And so what I tried was, let's make a read transaction first, which is started before my 50 read threads,
Mm-hmm.
and which keeps open until after the last read thread is closed. So
Okay.
in that way, I'm sure that at the beginning, it will create my files, and these files will not be deleted, will be available all the time. So during my loop with my 50 threads, I'm sure that there is no creation or deletion of this WAL index and WAL file.
Okay. Okay. So you prime all 50 of them with a select right at the beginning. If that select rolls back, you go ahead and retry, and then now you've got 50, and we're ready to begin the test. Is that right?
No. What I did was I start a first transaction,
Mm-hmm.
first read transaction. I read, then I have, for example, a thread sleep of 50 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
and then I close the transaction.
Okay.
So from the beginning of the transaction, when I read my file, the two files will be opened, created, and after 50 seconds, they will be deleted if there is nothing else going on.
Okay.
And once I started that first transaction, after I wait for 5 seconds, so I still active for 45 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
In that period, I will do the 50 other transactions.
Okay. Okay.
So
So
I'm
my prediction then is that you will you will still occasionally see a rollback, but it'll happen on the very first operation in each one of those. But then once you get into the 50 operations inside of the body, then you won't see any rollbacks anymore. Is that
it improved a lot, but it
okay?
didn't solve the whole
Mm.
issue. But we see it later. And then a second um, thing which solved the problem completely was I start my 50 threads one after another. If I wait 1 millisecond
Mm.
between every thread, which becomes 15 milliseconds because that's the minimal resolution.
Mm-hmm.
So every select 15 milliseconds in between, there is no rollback at all.
Mm.
Problem completely solved.
Interesting.
So now let me show you the result. Yeah, I'm gonna open it a little bit more that you have the full view.
Mm-hmm.
Is it still readable like this?
Yes, it is.
So this is based on the documentation, what I read, without fully understanding it. Because in some portions the documentation is not too clear for me. Some items are not really documented, but most of the documentation is very good.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want to know, it's not there. There are two types of locks. There is a traditional lock, which is an X lock and an X unlock function. And if I understand well, that goes directly on the database. That was already there before the WAL journal was created.
Okay.
And then you have this XSHM lock, that are all logs which have to do with that WAL index file. So you have the WAL write log, you have the WAL checkpoint log, the WAL recovery log, and then WAL read log 0 up to 4.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what does it mean? If we open a connection, then it will be automatically a shared SQL log shared. So a log can be shared or can be exclusive. If it's shared, others can go in. If it's exclusive, nobody can go in.
Right.
So from the moment that you open a connection to a database, you get a shared log. Here it gets interesting. If this is the first thread to connect to the database, then recovery is run.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a little bit confusion. The rebuilding of that WAL and that WAL index file, they call it recovery. But on the other hand, if your database crashes with an open connection, the first time you connect to it, it will also recover. So I have the impression that they use the same term for two different things.
Okay. But that
Yeah.
recovery after a database crash, is that applying the transactions that were found in the WAL?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because then you have to see, are all the transactions in the WAL fully committed already?
Mm-hmm.
If not, the ones who are not fully committed, who are only partial in the WALs, that one we forget about it, and the others we write them to the database.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I
And
understand that one. I don't understand what the first one is doing or why it's called recovery, but I think you're about
yeah,
to tell me.
it's a little bit confusing.
Mm-hmm.
But so what they mainly call recovery is rebuilding the WAL file and the WAL index file. Because
Okay.
the last time you closed, the last connection that you closed, by default, he will delete the WAL file and the WAL index file.
Okay.
There is a way to keep it open, which is especially meant for read-only connections to the database. Because if you have a read-only connection to your storage,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot have these files created.
Mm.
So that means somebody with a read-only connection would not be able to connect to the database. And that's why they allow you with a certain parameter to not delete the files. But
Okay.
I don't understand so far why they don't keep them permanently. Why do we delete them and rebuild them every time?
Yeah, and it's not that it's a new time-stamped file and then these would accumulate. It's that it's the same file name each time, and it's like,
Yeah,
okay, it's not there. Let me create it. Closing my connection, or um, I would imagine that that's part of the shared lock on the database. Last one out, delete the file.
yeah. Because
Hmm.
actually, before closing the last connection, everything that's inside that WAL file will be copied into the database.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, you don't really need the WAL file anymore. So if you don't need the WAL file, you don't need the index file.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
But they could
the
have
fact that
chosen
they
to just rebuild the WAL file and the index file as empty files and then leave. So it's
just
like,
leave them
yeah.
as empty files, because that's also when they copy everything,
Mm-hmm.
but you still have a connection open. They don't truncate the file; they just keep it open and they overwrite it again.
Mm.
But okay, so if this is the first thread to connect to the database, then recovery is run to rebuild the WAL index and the WAL file. So if there is no WAL file present, then the first thread connects to the database. What did I write here? Okay, if there is no WAL file present, yeah, that means that the connection was shut down in a normal way. So then there is nothing to really recover. So then they just rebuild and reinitialize an empty WAL file with a WAL index. But apart from a few headers, there is nothing inside. But the moment that they rebuild these two files, look what happens. Exclusive locks to a lot of lock items. And that means that at the same moment, there cannot be a second connection to the database.
At that particular moment, right. Yes.
Yeah. So that could be a major problem. That's why I try to make a first connection, wait for a while, and then start my 50 other threads.
Right. Okay. Okay. So yeah,
And
now
I
you
don't,
know that the WAL file and the index file exist, and at the
yeah,
very least, it's not going to have to take that exclusive lock to create them.
yeah. And the while they will not be deleted because that
Yeah.
first connection is kept open.
Okay. Yeah.
Because before I was creating connections, closing connections, but I was never sure that at certain moments, not all connections would be closed, and so the file would be deleted.
Okay.
But
And
so
that was the test that you saw things improved, but it still wasn't perfect. Is that correct?
not perfect. Yeah. Then if the last connection to a database in WAL mode crashed, then the first new connection to the open database will start the recovery process. There is very little to find, but that takes an exclusive lock on the database itself, which seems normal because at that moment you restart
Yeah.
a connection, you find an existing WAL file, it has not been deleted, and it contains records, pages which are not yet in the database.
Yep.
So you still have to copy them to the database. So the database has to be locked. Nobody else has access to it.
Yes. Yeah, that does make sense.
But then, and I think this one is also important, the moment that a connection starts a read transaction, and I think that's when we do that select statement, then you get, for a brief period, an exclusive lock to this WAL read locks. There are 5 of them, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exclusive lock on 1 to 4, not on 0. Now, what does that mean, that while WAL read lock? And then I have to go and look here. Here it is. If a connection holds a shared lock on that WAL read lock 0, that is actually an indication that that connection will ignore the WAL file and read everything directly from the database.
I wonder what that is there to accomplish.
You will. It takes a while, or it took for me a while to understand, but you will see immediately. The others, the WAL read lock n, so 1 to 4. In that case, if that one is locked, then the connection will use the WAL and not the database for any page in the first read mark n. So there is a second location, 4 different locations, which contain a pointer to a page in the WAL file. So the WAL file are all pages that are written.
Okay.
And so you have 4 pointers to this WAL file. And so if you have a wall read lock 1, that means that the connection will use the wall, the pages in the wall, and not into the database for any page until that pointer.
Okay. So I think I'm beginning to get an idea what that might be for. Is that that's to guarantee the isolation of transactions. So the first transaction, the concurrent transaction to start, is going to take that lock on that read lock 0, and it's going to say, look, I'm only reading what's currently in the database. I don't care about anything that gets written while this transaction is still open. But then the next concurrent one takes the read lock 1, and it says, now I'm going to start writing to this page of the WAL file, so I want to read it back, but I don't want it to affect the concurrent transaction.
You are incredible fast.
Oh, wow. Okay. So does that mean that you can only have...
What takes me hours, you in 2 minutes.
Well, I've read a lot of math papers on this.
Yeah.
Does that imply, though, that you can only have at most 5 concurrent transactions? That doesn't seem right. I must be missing something there.
Look here, line 42. These are my questions. Why 5 read marks? And only 4 of them are really used. So 1 up to 4. Why? My guess is, so the idea, the purpose is, like you said, the isolation. But they have this. How do they call this process? What was it again? I always forget the name. Sure. Checkpointing, they call it. So to go from the WAL file back to the database, it's a double process. First, you will copy data from the WAL to the database, and that's what they call checkpointing.
Okay.
The second step is to get rid of the WAL file.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they call resetting.
Okay, right.
Yeah. So imagine, yes, now I have to be careful what I say. Where was it? Yeah. So imagine I have written new things to the database. For example, imagine five pages, and they are 5 items, and they are added to the WAL file. At that moment, I start to read. So that read mark, that first read mark, will point to that number 5 position of the WAL.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the current situation when my read transaction started. If there is another write transaction, that will be added to position 6, 7, 8, 9 in the WAL.
Yeah.
My read transaction is still active, so my read transaction will always use from 1 to 5 in the WAL.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 to 5 in the WAL, for these pages, it will not go to the database. That means that in meanwhile, my database can start copying the first 5 pages from the WAL to the database. Because there is nobody reading these 5 pages from the database. Yeah, I'm reading them from the WAL.
Right, yes.
If now I write some more, for example, positions 5 to 10 in my WAL, I have a second read transaction, which starts at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
That means that second read transaction will always read pages 1 to 10 from the WAL and not from the database. But I cannot copy positions 5 to 10 to my database because I still have my first read transaction,
Yeah.
which will read the rest from the database. You see?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
And so this, what was it called? I always checkpointing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write it down because every time I checkpointing. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So you can't copy positions, 5 through 10 or 6 through 10 to the database because there are some read transactions going on that depend upon the data that's in the database, and that would get overwritten, and they would be able to see
Yeah.
information that was
Because
stored outside of their transaction. Yeah.
because my eldest read transaction still needs the old data from the database.
Yep.
So these read marks are there to tell SQLite up to where can I already start copying. So can I start do this checkpointing?
Mm-hmm.
And then the next step, once you have been checkpointing the full content of your WAL file, so everything that has been written has been copied to the database, at that moment, the next write transaction can reset your WAL file. Because then there is
Mm-hmm.
nothing new anymore in your WAL, so you
Right.
can just override it. And that's what they call reset.
Okay. So now I can
Provided,
extrapolate from that it's not that you can have only 5 concurrent transactions. It's that when you start reading, you're going to start reading from the highest checkpoint. So if you've got 50 transactions that are coming in and they all start reading, they're all going to get checkpoint 0, actually, because they're all reading directly from the database. Nobody has written to the WAL.
yeah.
And so that means only 5 concurrent write transactions before it runs out of read logs.
I don't think that. I didn't find more explanation on that, but I guess it keeps the 5 lowest numbers. Because the lowest numbers are the limitations.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah,
Course,
I'm
then,
thinking too. Yeah, I'm making too many assumptions about what the transactions are doing. It's just at a higher level. It's like I've written some things, I've read some things, and now I need to allocate a new read pointer because now I need to be able to read what I've written, and anybody who comes behind me needs to be able to read what I've written. And so you can have 5 of those, but they roll. So
Yeah.
so as soon as those other transactions complete, then we can shift these things down.
Yeah, I think that's the purpose. But that means you get, so these are these WAL read locks. So they protect the read marks. And the moment that you start a read transaction, they will lock exclusively one of these positions for a very brief time. But so this lock means that a read which starts concurrent can run into a lock.
I got it. Yes.
So I think the combination of these two, the recovery on one side and the read marks on the other side, seem to me like an explanation that, and also in their documentation, they do mention that from time to time you get read locks and that you run into this recovery locks. So, because the source code, it's well documented, the source code, but it's still so complex that I was not sure. It gave me the direction, but to be 100% sure, no, not at all.
Yeah, so it's got
But
one up
so
on my source code, is that mine is complex and not well documented. So.
but I didn't contacted yet the maker of SQLite. But so it looks like we can, just by retrying, and SQLite has a built-in retry algorithm that retries even quicker than the rollback we would standard do.
Yeah.
Because if you look into the source code, it's really every 1 milliseconds.
Right.
And after that, they start being more aggressive. But so a combination of our retry and the retry in SQLite, I think that is the practical solution.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that outcome. So yeah. So the SQLite is going to retry just around that file lock,
Yeah.
so that it can save the transaction, but then, like any retry, it's going to have to give up at some point. And then that's the point where our code takes over and it's like, okay, we're not trying to save the transaction, roll it back. We're just trying to save the data.
Yeah. So actually, what you suggested from the beginning, but what comforts me is that with all the testing, I've not found anything that does not work. So
Excellent.
I think we can, from here, we can continue and work on Jinaga.
Very
But
nice.
no, I spent a lot of time on it, but I'm happy I did, because it improved my understanding of SQLite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've got this documented as well, so we can refer back to it.
Yeah, and at least I'm not in doubt anymore. There must be something wrong in the code. You never know, but it looks like it is. It's all right, and it is performant.
Excellent.
Because at a certain moment, the loops were getting a lot longer. But that was, of course, because I started, for example, with a delay of 10 seconds. So if he starts with the transaction with a delay of 10 seconds, but he rolls back on the select after 10 seconds, then you lose 10 seconds.
Right.
And you
Right.
start again, and you start again. But that's something that in a practical situation will never happen, because
Right.
you don't wait for 10 seconds, you do your select immediate.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
So if it fails, you retry immediate, which is perhaps 15 milliseconds. But
yeah. So we're not abusing those locks, and
yeah,
well, in that case, it's still waiting until we start the select before it takes the file lock. So um, so it's really not that we were abusing here, but yeah, we definitely abusing transactions.
and so even we don't have to start that initial connection, because when I left out the initial connection and I waited for 15 milliseconds in between every thread, then the locks were completely gone. So we don't have to make it more complicated.
Very good. I
Good.
like
That was a long journey, but with a good outcome. And so
Indeed.
now I'm gonna work on getting Jinaga translated to .NET.
Yes, yes, and I think that the right algorithm is pretty solid. So, so yeah, you can get started there. When you get to the query algorithm, that one is what I've got in Jinaga.JS right now is still the linear pipeline. I don't have the branching pipelines generating queries. But I think the direction that I would like to take now with Jinaga.js is to support those those branching pipelines on the server side, um, even though there's no way to specify them yet on the client side in JS. Um, so, so yeah, uh, I've got version 3 of Jinaga.JS published to both npm and Docker Hub. So now you can grab a new version of the container, and that's a 3.0 database, and then you can build that against Jinaga.js 3.0, and it will work, and it'll be much better performance when it comes to loading the ancestors.
Okay, that's great.
Yep. So I'm doing that kind of as a soft launch. I'm not going crazy on social media quite yet, um, but I did that launch so that I could update the Improving You application to use that new version of the of Jinaga, and then update its database using the update script.
Yeah.
And then that kind of test it out. That'll allow me to then move the database over to managed Postgres, which compared to the virtual machine cuts the cost to about 30%, and then also that should be a bit more resilient. The virtual machine we saw was kind of flaking out every once in a while. So it's like let's go with a service that Azure built specifically for this, and so we'll give that a try. But then that'll be testing out version 3, and then I think I'll start putting together some documentation, I'll refresh the Jinaga.com site and talk about version 3, get some buzz on that, and then start focusing on supporting the branching pipelines on the back end, so that now Jinaga.net can connect to Jinaga.js on the back end.
Yeah, that would be nice if we have it on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that would be a more direct path to getting something working over and above writing the server side in .NET right now. But the next step after that is to get the server side written in .NET, and then you can choose. Do you want to run on Node? Do you want to run on ASP.NET? And then which front end do you want? Mix and match. Have fun.
Yeah, but I think it's a good way to go, because that will get the first result faster, and then the experience we have from .NET and the JS environment will allow us to convert the server much faster to .NET as well.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and as I went back to the JavaScript code, I learned so much from Jinaga.net that I'm like this. That I would not have realized had I not been working on basically going back to reimagining what is the programming experience like. And so one of the things that I think I want to do with Jinaga.com is to start to focus on the React experience firsthand, rather than focus on the J.Watch experience. As I'm developing applications with Jinaga, I'm using React all the time. I'm not using J.Watch, and when I look back at the code that does use J.Watch, that's really complicated. So it's like, yeah, it's a very simple idea to start with, but then in order to get it to be as rich a query as you need to populate a user interface, you have just lots of watches that are branching off of one another, and it starts to get out of control with that kind of syntax. But with a projection syntax like you've got in Jinaga React, it's a lot easier to follow and a lot easier to
Hmm.
compose. So yeah, I
And
think that should be the first experience that you see of Jinaga when you go to Jinaga.com.
and how would you translate that to .NET then? Uh,
Um, yeah, so in .NET, because and this is one of the things that I learned from .NET and brought back to Jinaga.js is that the query experience in .NET already includes projections because it's using the link syntax. Um,
yeah.
and so you can build um, a meaningfully complex query, one that would fully support a user interface in a single projection. Whereas with J.Watch, you have to string a whole bunch of linear pipelines together and say, okay, they get this far and then they fan out. So, all right, I need to get to all of the people who are signed up for this course, but then fan out and grab their username and their email um, and and that can just be expressed in the projection. So ultimately, I would like to be able to take the projection syntax that I've got for Jinaga React and bring that back into the main library. I'm not exactly sure how to do that yet because um, in Jinaga React, the projection syntax also includes projecting into child components. So it already understands that you're inside of React in order to do that. Um, but if you were in Angular, it would have to be a similar syntax but a different kind of component. Uh, and then what you do with that projection would obviously be different. In React, you're going to bind those to props of a render function. In Angular, you're going to um, make those objects inside of a set of observables. And then, uh, yeah, actually, I don't really want to think about the Angular one too much because it just sounds way complicated as compared to the React version.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
for the future.
yeah, yep, that's true.
Let's first see what we get out of it. Uh, to
Yep,
try to read and to store the facts in the database in SQLite.
yeah, but there already is a bit of an update on Jinaga.com. Um, let me pull up Jinaga.com, and in fact, I don't need to share. You can just pull it up yourself as well. Um, but yeah, I was talking to a friend about the kind of the sales pitch of Jinaga. It's like, why would I want to use Jinaga on a professional application? And it wasn't the resilient, disconnected application, all that stuff. It wasn't the details of the implementation. It was that you're creating an application by just writing the business logic once as opposed to 3 times. So I changed um, the tagline application agnostic backend for web applications. So right there, I'm targeting web applications, um, and so that means as I um, rebuild the site for Jinaga 3.0, it's going to be specifically web applications with React. And we know that it supports other types of applications, but that's the first experience that you see, and that's really where the sales pitch is.
Okay.
So yeah, it starts with kind of a visual elevator pitch of
Mhm.
typically you write a custom front end, a custom API, a custom database. But with Jinaga, custom API, let Jinaga take care of the back end. And that's an image you can just bring up on your phone and in landscape mode. You know, scroll right to that, show people, and then by the time the elevator stops at the third floor, they're like, I understand why I would want to use Jinaga.
Yeah. And the disconnected apps, because that's also something you can summarize in a small picture. Wouldn't you want to have the two, the two ways of using Jinaga?
I think so, but I think maybe this gets you in the door, and then that's the next thing that you see. Um, the reason, and in fact, up here at the top, you can go to PWAs. So I still have my PWA workshop where I bring people through using Gatsby and Workbox and Jinaga in order to build PWAs. But the thing is that PWAs really haven't caught on yet. I think there's still a chance, um, but yeah, I really don't hear people asking for that too often. Um, so far, I've had one client that has specifically asked for that, and I basically my role with them was to give them some architectural guidance. That was actually while I was still writing the book, so so I was like, and there's more coming, but this is what I can tell you right now, um, and uh, and so they basically had an investment in some existing technology. They had an offline solution that wasn't really quite working for them, and so my guidance started with, fix these small things in order to get better, and then now you can take a larger investment to fix these big things and get much better. Um, my my guidance could not have been to put that aside, rewrite your application inside of Jinaga, and now you've got everything that you need.
Because
Um,
it would take too long.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I need to get people building applications with Jinaga first, and then say, oh, and by the way, you just turn this on, and it's an offline capable app. Um, yeah, because I'm not going to get them there from where they are now, because they already thought this was an easy problem. They tried it, and now they're in a pickle.
Mm. Problem, yeah.
Yep.
Offline. Yeah.
Yep. So far on the front page, I've simplified things in a couple of different ways. Um, now I am, just fully adopting that we're talking about TypeScript. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yes, Jinaga still works just fine in JavaScript, but the first examples that you see here are TypeScript examples. Um,
Yeah.
and that simplified the examples a bit. Before they were just vanilla JavaScript, no best practices, no class declarations at all. Just here's a JSON object, um, and the examples look kind of muddy because of that. But now we say, okay, we're going to define a fact type, and then we're going to create a fact. So now we're going to create an instance of that thing. This used to be the first block of code that you saw, and it had the full JSON expressed. So now add a little bit of type declaration, and now this becomes simpler. And then here showing some of the best practices of rather than just use the magic string, use tweet.type. And then the next thing was for displaying facts. This is where it got really muddy because I was using j.watch, and I was calling a function that could have been using jQuery for as much as it was doing. So it was like, I want to display this tweet. Here's an object. And it's like, okay, I have to put this in the DOM somehow. So that's kind of the jQuery style of thinking, and it's the most generic way of doing web development, but that's not how people do web development these days. So I like, all right, you are going to be doing this in React. So there you go. That's how you create a component. So yeah, show you the specification with just a little bit of branching going on. So you've got a couple of different props in the component, and then show you now the composition. So you can create a collection using that mapping to that component that you just used. And so, yeah, this is the part that would have to look different in Angular, and so that's why specification 4 is not yet a like a Jinaga Jinaga core idea. Yep. So yeah, and then subscribe to the tweets, and you're good. There's the demos, which are which are all using TypeScript, so it should be familiar to what you just saw here.
And then there is Michael, thumbs up.
Yeah. Yeah. So starting to make some progress on the messaging there, and I was very happy to finally finish the project of upgrading this to Gatsby 4 from 2, which is much harder than it needs to be. But yeah, and now we can start with a fresh new slate of JavaScript vulnerabilities and move forward instead of dealing with the same old ones.
It's nice to see that it has been updated here. I didn't went to the website for a while. While being busy with this SQLiting.
Yeah.
So there's
that was just this week thing. So
okay.
So yeah, you didn't miss anything. But yeah, now we've got these new packages. So here's the new Jinaga npm package version 3.0, published 10 hours ago. So describe the changes that you need to make in version 3. So yeah, here's really the only change that you need to make to your code is add the type as the second parameter to has if you're going to be using predecessors in your specification functions. And then you could either use the Docker image, but if you already have one, if you already have Postgres installed, now there is a brand new shell script, setup.sh. So set a few environment variables. I like this better than just passing a bunch of parameters because you get to kind of think through things and do them in your order, and then say, okay, now I'm ready to go commit and run the script. And it's the same set of environment variables if you want to do the upgrade script. And then that just uses Postgres on whatever database you have. So even if you've already started your own Docker container, but you used the 2.0 database, then you can use this upgrade script on that container to upgrade it to a 3.0 database.
Okay.
But yep, so that's out
Indeed.
there, and the brand new
published 11 hours ago.
Yeah.
And 15 weekly downloads. Okay, it starts.
Yeah, and those are probably all me. Yep, that is what we got. So we're making some progress.
Good. Then yeah, there were times when there were up to 200 downloads per week. Who was busy with it at that time?
Yeah, I think that was probably me making a bunch of changes on the Improving You application and running through CI.
Oh, okay, must be that. Are there still any public speaking coming up soon? Or
yes, the next one coming up is a live event in Austin. I'm going to be at that conference, and so I'm starting to work on some other live events. So KCDC, which is going to be like in August, I believe, is the next one that I've submitted for. So I'm kind of easing back into the live events. But as far as online events, What have I got? Actually, I don't think I've got anything on the books right now for an online event.
Okay. Oh, now that COVID is almost behind us, getting back to a normal life.
Yep. Yep.
Although
Here's hoping anyway.
it will, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Now that most people, either they are vaccinated, either they got sick, so they got immune.
Mm-hmm.
Now it has been long enough.
Yep. Yep. In the SIR model, there's a nice big chunk in R now. That's a
Yes.
susceptible, infected, and removed. Or you could be optimistic and say recovered, but it's really all types of removal from the population.
Okay. It can be recovered, but it can also be dead. Or
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's but I think most of the people who died were not really young people or in good health. It's always sad.
Yeah. It was definitely one of the big events in humanity. So yeah, people are going to look back on this, and just like with the Black Plague and with the other huge events. I think really the only reason that it wasn't quite as bad as that in terms of percentage of population was that we have better technology now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, in terms of raw numbers, I think well, I would have to look up the raw numbers in order to really say for sure. The population of the planet is much larger now than it was back then, so I think the raw numbers are actually bigger.
But we also, on one hand, there is a lot more medical science to help, but on the other hand, we are also much more vulnerable, living closer
Yes.
together, traveling a lot.
Yes, that is true.
If you have small villages which are hours away from each other, where you have to travel on horses, then infection will not spread that fast.
Yep. Yeah, it could take out an entire village, but then it's isolated, and people don't even learn about that until the next horse arrives.
I think in 2 generations, there will be little children who say, "Oh, somewhere in the cave of grandfather, some strange masks."
Yep.
Yeah. What do they do with these things?
And Bill Gates is publishing a new book now. So, I mean, I just got finished with his climate change book, and is now like, oh, okay, now he's writing a book about how to never have a pandemic again. And it's like, okay, the climate change one, that seems like there's a lot of work there, but it seems like with this one, there's not really a lot of work. We've done most of the hard work. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. It's in pre-order right now.
So it's worth reading it.
Yeah. Certainly the last one was. So I'm expecting this one will be as well.
Mm-hmm. No, I think on the positive side, it brought quite a lot of new technology now. If you see the vaccines that we have today, how fast they have been developed, new types of vaccination.
Yeah.
So that might bring some solutions for other diseases as well.
Yep, I believe so.
But yeah, every progress comes with a cost.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. What will be the cost for historical modeling?
Well, if
that's an exception.
the major objection is to be believed, the cost is going to be just this pile of data. It's like, what do I do with all this data? So, well, you mine it for insight. It's valuable data. Yes, but I have to store it. Yeah. Okay, that's the cost.
Yeah, I was still wondering about removal of data, because if I see here in Europe, it gets everywhere in Europe a little bit. They get scared of it like hell, but especially the Netherlands. I have a lot of customers. They are very, very focused on that.
Yeah.
So the right to be forgotten and
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
my usual answer to that question is that
encryption.
yeah, what you can do is delete the delete the user that wants to be forgotten and all of their successors, and now you have you're left with a subgraph that is consistent, is correct, and does not include any of the information that was supposed to be forgotten. Um, uh, and if you want to do that delete in a way uh, that doesn't disrupt all of the systems downstream, you can do that through cryptographic shredding, where you have the entire subgraph encrypted according to a key that particular user owns, and then you just forget the key. And now there's data around, but you have no way to interpret it. So I mean, both of those are much easier to say than they are to implement. I grant that, but I think what we need to do is, in addition to make that an easy operation, also make it easy to build in a policy of just routine forgetting of information. So, so that would definitely be predicated on having the period pattern involved in your model. But yeah, you should be able to put in a policy on your server to say the current and past 3 periods are live. The up to 10 periods ago, those are in cold storage, and then beyond that, they are ejected from cold storage and forgotten forever.
Yeah.
And then you build that as a policy, and then you don't even have to think about discarding information. It's a thing that you've planned to do.
Because I see two things. There is really this by employee, an employee who leaves the company, everything related to him, but not everything. His name, the fact that he was an employee, has to stay there. But for example, perhaps the work that he did, or the GPS coordinates of the route he took, may have to be removed.
Yeah.
And then for existing employees who are still in the company, that there is a sort of time limit on the GPS coordinates. We say, okay, everything from last month or the 2 last months is retrievable by default. And if you want to go further, you need a special password, or
Yeah.
even with a limit of 1 or 2 years, whatever. But
Yeah, so historical modeling doesn't give you just an answer, but it does give you a way to analyze the problem. So yeah, you can say these are the requirements. So okay, now let's take a look at the model. Let's compute the the graph, the subgraph that is the transitive closure in the successor direction. Usually I talk about transitive closure predecessors. This one is successors. So if I were to forget that part of the model, would I capture only the things that you want to forget and not the things that you don't want to forget? So for example, GPS coordinates. Okay, I want to make sure that the GPS coordinates are associated with a device that is then associated with a user. So that way, when I delete the user, I delete that the user was associated with this device, but the device is not in that subgraph. Whereas if I put the device as a successor to the user, then the device would get deleted as well as the GPS coordinates. So yeah, you have to reason through it.
it's some complex thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, but
We will see when.
you could write a query and you can say, what's all the things that'll be deleted? These. Whoa. I want to save that information. Refactor the model.
Mm,
Rerun the query. All right, that looks good.
yeah. Because that are things that a customer thinks in terms of a standard database,
Mm-hmm.
and a standard database is just delete.
Yeah.
So a customer might not understand why we are not able to delete certain things
Mm-hmm.
easy. And the government might even less understand it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. Very true. Um, yeah. So so yeah, it might be a good idea to express that in terms of exchanging documents as paper. So and that kind of gets into the distributed nature of it. So it's like, okay, I'm going to delete all of my records about you, but I've already you know written an invoice, and then I shared that invoice with my accountant. So he's got a copy of an invoice that has your name on it. Um, and so now I have to delete my records, and I have to tell others to delete their records. And that's kind of a proxy for what a historical model is uh, doing with the merge algorithm of various trees, and it's easy to merge inserts, but there is no uh, guaranteed way to merge deletes.
yeah. Remove something that has already been removed.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will see when we get there. But
Yep.
for the moment, the Dutch government, from time to time, you see, oh, they find that company, and then most of the time it's about very big companies like
Mm-hmm.
Google, Facebook. Then it's Europe who finds them.
Mm.
But the Dutch government has been finding also companies on national level.
Mm.
And when they get to smaller companies at a certain moment,
Yeah.
I don't think they will come asking me what I'm doing. But yeah, 5 or 10 years from now, if they continue to go in that way, we might need a solution.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, best to start thinking about it now and build it into the platform so that that could have actually be one of the reasons that people adopt the platform is that it's like, okay, there's already an answer to this problem, and so um,
yeah,
and so we've got this body of people that have of companies that have taken the same solution, and then that can support a group of of lawyers and of insurance and all of the things that are necessary in order to make sure that that we can fight those fights and can
yeah,
protect our customers.
to keep out of trouble.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Cool. Awesome. And oh goodness.
Yeah, I was
There we
just saying next week.
go. Next week, yes.
He
So you're
was,
not
he
going to
was
be here next
cutting me
week?
out. Sorry?
And so you said you're not going to be here next week?
Next week I will not be there.
Okay.
It's my youngest son who is preparing for his driving license. So he has been driving with me now for 3 years. Here in France, you have, what is it called? Conduite accompagnée. That means that the children can drive with, for example, their parents, just
Mm-hmm.
to exercise.
Nice.
Then when they get 17 and a half, they can do their exam and then can get their driving license.
Yeah. I imagine that
Which is
produces better
actually,
drivers.
well, I like this system very much. We didn't have it in Belgium.
Mm-hmm.
It does exist here in France. And the advantage is that the children, especially the boys, don't see cars as toys anymore,
Right.
but
Yes.
as a normal tool.
Yes.
After 3 years, they have some experience. They know that they don't have to go at 200 kilometers an hour,
Uh-huh.
that they have to be careful, because otherwise, after 20 hours of course and then go on the route yourself. It's not. But so next week Monday he has a last meeting with because as a parent you exercise with them, but before that they have already to go to school for a number of hours to learn the basics. And so before the exam they have to see the teacher again to see whether they are up to speed. And that meeting is just on our hours. So yeah, I couldn't change that one. So yeah.
Well,
Okay.
congratulations and good luck.
Well, but the exam is then another week later, I think, or 2 weeks.
Okay.
But that will, I hope, not be on Monday. But anyway, for the exam, I don't have to be there. Okay, so Michael, see you in 2 weeks then.
Yes, I will see you in 2 weeks.
Okay,
Right.
see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.